It is January 28th, 2026, the 1433rd day of a war that has redefined the meaning of modern conflict. For 20 years, I have covered wars from the mud of trenches to the marble halls of diplomacy, and I can tell you that the maps flickering on your news screens are often the least important part of the story. While the mainstream headlines are obsessed with the formal breakthroughs of the recent tripartite talks in Abu Dhabi, those of us on the ground see a much different, more dangerous reality. Take, for instance, a recent appeal from soldiers of the 95th Air Assault Brigade in the Pokrovsk sector. They are not asking for tanks or fighter jets in this dispatch. They are asking for 3 drones, the Matrix 4T. In the hottest sector of the entire front, where the gray zone is a landscape of constant surveillance, a $5,000 drone is the difference between a successful mission and a total wipeout. But here is the part that is not widely covered. The logistics of this war have become a subscription model for survival. Soldiers are crowdfunding their own eyes because the formal procurement chains are knotted in political red tape. This desperation on the front line stands in stark contrast to the bickering in Europe. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has been vocal, urging allies to ignore buy European protectionism and get Ukraine what it needs now, even if it comes from the United States. France, however, remains a major hurdle, insisting that money stay within the European Union to bolster local defense manufacturers. While they argue over contracts, Ukraine has moved toward an innovative but precarious procurement strategy known as the Danish model. This system bypasses traditional delays by directly financing Ukrainian manufacturers to build the equipment their own soldiers are requesting. But even this can only fill so many gaps when the total defense requirement for 2026 has ballooned to $120 billion. One of the most vivid descriptions I have heard recently about the state of Ukrainian air defense is the transition from a hedgehog to a sea pig. In early 2025, the goal was to turn Ukraine into an impenetrable hedgehog of spines and armor. By 2026, the reality is a sea pig, fundamentally important, yet soft and vulnerable because missile supplies are irregular. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has admitted that Berlin has reached its limit, saying Germany has already committed more than 1/3 of its total anti-aircraft power to Kyiv. Germany is currently the only nation supplying the IRIS-T systems, but stocks are so low that intercept rates can swing from a triumphant 90% down to nearly 0 in a single night when the tubes run dry. When Russia launches its Zircon hypersonic missiles, the survival of cities like Kharkiv depends on a dwindling stock of specialized Patriot PAC-3 ammunition that the West is struggling to mass produce. While the air is a theater of high-tech desperation, a growing sea of ghosts is forming in the Baltic. Russia's Shadow Fleet has expanded to an incredible total of 801 ships. These are zombie tankers, aging unregistered vessels moving oil out of bases like St. Petersburg without valid safety or insurance documents. Just this month, German authorities took an unprecedented step to block one such vessel, the Tavian. Despite the principle of free passage, the German Federal Police intercepted the Tavian after discovering its registration was forged and its identity did not exist in official databases. It was a ghost ship that on paper did not exist, yet it was sailing toward the North Sea carrying tens of thousands of tons of crude oil. A coalition of 14 nations, including the Baltic and Nordic states, has issued a warning. Any ship without a clear flag will be treated as stateless and subject to detention. Denmark sits at the gateway of this route, making the Baltic a potential flashpoint for maritime escalation, a matter diplomats in Abu Dhabi are not even touching. Speaking of Abu Dhabi, the talks there have been described as a formal breakthrough with 0 actual altitude. Russia insists that Ukraine must abandon its own territories in Donbas, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson before any real peace can be discussed. The Ukrainian side maintains that no territorial concessions will be made under any circumstances. It is a stalemate disguised as progress, designed to stall for time while Russia rebuilds its assault groups. The human cost of this stalling is found in the dark. In Kharkiv, 80% of the region is without power following systematic strikes on energy infrastructure, leaving half the city in total shadow. While civilians huddle in the cold, the Kremlin has opened a new front in the war of attrition. This is the student drone pipeline. The Russian Ministry of Defense is now openly recruiting students across the country for its unmanned forces. They are being promised they can return to their studies after a temporary break of 1 year, a lie, as current decrees prevent anyone from leaving the military until the mobilization order is formally canceled. These young recruits are being funneled into production hubs like Alabuga in Tatarstan, where the assembly of Shahed drones has reached an industrial scale. Tactically, the war has reached a level of mother drones that is barely discussed in Western media. We are seeing the rise of Molniya drones that act as carriers, delivering smaller FPV strike drones deep into the rear to bypass electronic warfare. These plywood platforms are simple and cheap, but they are reshaping the battlefield by pushing the zone of risk 50 kilometers behind the front line. On the ground, the discrepancy between the Kremlin's reports and the tactical reality is wider than ever. Russian General Staff Chief Gerasimov recently claimed the occupation of Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi, yet frontline reports and satellite monitoring show Russian forces are still at least 10 kilometers away from the town. It is a war of propaganda where imaginary victories are used to bolster a failing negotiation position. The risks of any forced withdrawal or frozen conflict are catastrophic. Major Sladens outlines 3 layers of risk: strategic, military, and political. Strategically, leaving Donbass gives Russia a permanent staging ground for future offensives. Militarily, it means losing the fortifications that have been held for years, allowing the Russian army to build up reserves without pressure. Politically, such a move would trigger a crisis of governance within Ukraine, which is exactly what the Kremlin desires. This is the war as it stands on day 1433, a conflict defined by empty missile tubes, zombie tankers in the Baltic, and a diplomatic process that remains as flightless as a penguin. Don't look at the shifting maps. Look at the logistics of the 95th Brigade and the darkness in Kharkiv. That is where the future of Europe is truly being written.